Welcome back to the Stitch Sessions and another segment in our Life's a Beach crochet series. It's early May and the sun is finally starting to come out, and today we're going to take you for a little stroll along the Toronto waterfront. So a lot of the parks and the beaches are still currently closed due to some of the lockdowns here in Ontario, but we're fortunate enough that the beautiful beaches along the Toronto lakefront are open. So it's nice and early in the morning, and we're going to go for a beautiful walk down there where I can show off my beautiful, I think it's beautiful, beach summer sun hat. And once we're done there, I'm going to take you inside and show you how you can make your own step by step. Now, I'm not at the beach yet. It tends to be a little bit windy down there, so taking my lesson from Coburg Beach, where it was really windy and you couldn't hear anything I said, we're just gonna take a little stroll down there, and I thought I'd chit chat with you guys beforehand. So let's get to the beach. All right. Finally back from our really long walk. I ended up going for just over 2 hours. We covered 9 kilometers. So we are situated in the west end of the city, right down by the lake. And we walked almost to the downtown court, which is the center of the city, and made our way back. So that's 9 kilometers. So I'm definitely feeling like I need a little bit of a coffee and some crochet. So let's take you back inside and show you how you can craft your very own summer beach hat. So for durability in this project, instead of using a cotton yarn like I've used in the past, I'm going to be using some hemp cord. I initially picked up some of this hemp cord from Michael's. As you can see here, I got it in the 120-foot package, which I thought was going to be plenty, but it turned out that I needed a lot more. So I ended up ordering this hemp cord from Amazon. It's called Hemp Teak, and I chose this really pretty lavender color to continue on in the colorway, which I had started with the hemp cord that I bought at Michael's. And I'll put a link for it in the description box down below. And it's called Hemp Teak, and it comes in 205-foot spools, and I ended up using a total of 4 spools. So for my hat in total, I used 820 feet or 250 meters of this cord, and I used the 20-pound cord for this project, FYI. The hook size I'm using is a 3.75 millimeter hook, also known as an F or a size 5. This is generally the smallest I like to go down to because I find it becomes too cumbersome, and with my eyesight lately, I find that this is the most comfortable for me. And like I said, I've already been working on kind of the patchwork of it, and I'm pretty comfortable with it, and I'm very happy with how the stitches are sitting, and it's allowing some breathability through the top of the hat as well. Okay, so that's a 3.75 millimeter hook. Absolutely, you always want to have your trusty pair of scissors and a darning needle for sewing any ends in later on. Okay, I would recommend having something to mark your work with, a stitch marker. I always just like using something simple like a safety pin, which works out really well. And of course, you're going to want a measuring tape, as well as maybe a piece of paper and a pencil to figure out the measurements for your hat. So let's talk about that. Okay, so we're going to do a quick little lesson on how to figure out the measurements you need to know to create your hat. And this will come in handy for anything, like maybe if you're going to make beanies or, winter hats. This is a great way to figure out the measurements you are going to need. So the first thing you want to do is take the measurement that goes around your subject's head. And of course, I've always said that I'm not an artiste of the drawing caliber. So what does that mean? It means you want to take, so if this is their head here, again, terrible, terrible drawing. You want to measure the head around the back all the way until it comes around to the middle of the forehead, okay? So in case you're wondering, this is supposed to be a nose and that is a chin. So I know it's a terrible drawing, but hopefully you get where I'm going with this. So that's the neck. So this is where you're going to get your measurements for your circumference, okay? Once you have that number, so the thing we want to figure out is we're going to start from the top. So I'm just going to draw a crude thing of the hat here, okay? So we are going to start from the top and then work our way down. We need to know how wide the top part of the hat will go. So we know that we need to create a circle for the top of the hat. This is not necessarily related to the circumference at this moment, but you need the circumference number in order to get the width of your top circle or your diameter here. So I have an average head size of 22 inches. So you're going to take your number 22 and you're going to take 1 away. So that's going to leave me with 21 inches. And generally it's just kind of a general rule. You want to take 1 inch away so that your hat fits snugly. Remember, especially with crochet, the stitches will loosen and relax after a while. And so you don't want it to be too big and floppy. So you take away 1. So this is my circumference, okay? And this is an average circumference for an adult female, okay? Once you have that number, you're then going to divide it. So 21, you're going to divide it by pi. Remember pi from math? If you don't know what pi is, it always equals 3.14. So you're going to take that number. So you're going to take 21 and divide it by 3.14, and that's going to give you approximately 6.69 inches. Now, this 6.9 is really a non-friendly number, we like to call it. So I always will round up. So we're going to say 6.75. So for me, I know that I have to create a circle that is going to end up measuring 6.75 inches across. Now, if you are working on the metric system, have no fear. That works out to approximately 17 centimeters, okay? So it's either 6.75 inches or 17 centimeters, okay? So that's the first thing that you want to have on hand. That's the first measurement you want to have on hand, because we are going to create our circle first. Once we get our circle where it's wide enough to measure 6.75 inches, we'll then stop increasing to create now the height of the hat, which is this part here. Okay, and you'll just keep going in rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds until you get the height that you need. Now, the next question you're going to ask me is, how do I know the height that I need? Well, fantastic question. We want to come back to our original circumference number. So we know that it was 21 because we had 22 minus 1. So in order to get the height, we now take 21 inches. We divide that number by 10, which gives us 2.1. And then we multiply it by 4. And so for me, that's going to give me 8.4 inches. And in centimeters, that is going to be approximately 21 centimeters. Okay, so these are the two main numbers I need to know. That's it, that's all. So my diameter of my circle is going to be 6.75 inches, and the height of my hat is going to be 8.4 or 21 centimeters. And that's all you need to know, and we're ready to start our hat. So let's dive in. Keep these numbers on hand so you can refer to it, and let's get cooking. Okay, so I'm going to start with this color here. Now, this is why having that stitch marker in hand is going to be very important. If you're still new to crocheting circular shapes, you may only be familiar with finishing the rounds by slip stitching and then chaining up to begin the next round. In this project, we are going to crochet in the spiral round. So that means we are not going to slip stitch to close off each round of the circle. So that means that literally we're going to start in the center, and we're just going to keep crocheting around and around until we get the width that we want. And actually, if you happen to have a sun hat lying around, a prefabricated one, you can actually take a look at the top of that, because a lot of times those straw hats, even, you'll see that it starts from a center and then it spirals out. So we are essentially doing the same thing. So we're going to begin by using a cinch circle, okay? And for me, I think it's really important to use the cinch circle because you really want that center to be nice and tight. So you see that? So we start with the center, and now hopefully you can see that it is just going around and around and around, okay? So if you're still uncomfortable a little bit with cinch circles, this will be a great time to practice. So we're gonna wrap our yarn around as if we're gonna do a slip knot. And then we're just going to pull that through. And I just took my thumb out, and see, it just sits nice and loose like that. And now I'm going to chain 1 to secure. And then I just like to loosen up that tail right about there. Okay. So we want to start off by placing 6 single crochets into our circle here. So we're going to insert our hook into the circle, pull up a loop, and this is going to be the wonky part because everything is kind of loosey-goosey. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through both. Okay, so just kind of typical single crochet. So I'm going to do that again, working into the circle, yarn over and pull through 2. So I want them to be fairly snug for this hat, but again, you have to be careful because if you stitch too tight, you'll have a very difficult time getting your hook in for subsequent rounds, okay? So go ahead and do 6 single crochets, and I'll meet you when it's time to cinch our circle. Okay, so I have 6 single crochets here. And now I'm going to take that tail, and I just want to pull on it to cinch, and you can see that that circle is getting cinched shut. You want to pull it as tightly as possible, and now you can see it's got a nice tight center. And so what I do want to do is I want to find the very next stitch, which is right there, okay? So I'm going to find the very next stitch, which is right here. And I may have to help it along. Yeah, it got a little tight there. I'm just going to insert my hook. And this is normally where I would slip stitch to join. But in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a loop through. And I have to say, this cording is actually not bad to work with. Okay, so I've got 2 loops. Now I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through both of them just like a regular single crochet. So I'm officially moving up to the next round. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place a stitch marker in that very first stitch there, and that will help me know I've come back, I've finished the next round. Okay, so, and don't worry, there's a little, it looks like there's a little bit of a gap there. Just kind of might want to pull that a little tighter. Okay, round 2, we're now going to increase the number of stitches. So right now we want to create a flat circle until we reach our 6.75 inch diameter measurement. Okay, so we're just going to go back into that same stitch and do another one. So we now want to do 2 stitches into each stitch of this round. So we're going to increase the number of our stitches from 6 to 12. So that means I'm going to put 2 in each. So there's the second one. Now I'm going to go into the next stitch here. Now this first few rounds are going to be a little tricky just because everything seems so tight. Okay, so there's 1, and I want to go back into that same stitch and 2. Okay, now I go into the next one and 2 in here. And I'm going to do this all the way around. Okay, so I've finished round 2, and I know that because I've come up to my stitch marker here and I've got 12 stitches. So we're going to move on to round 3, and we are now going to increase into every second stitch. Okay, so I just took the stitch marker out, so I'm going to place 1 into there, and I'm going to replace that stitch marker. Now what I would recommend, because I'm only going to do a few rounds with you here, is we do have a tutorial on how to crochet a circle, and I go into depth on the principles of how to keep increasing to keep your circle flat. So understanding where we increase. So this, we're going into round 3. So instead of doing 2 stitches into each stitch, we're going to do 2 stitches into every second stitch. And then as we go into the next row, which I'll show you again, round, we will increase into every third stitch. And so the bigger your circle, the more spaced out your increases are. And remember, increases just simply means that you're placing 2 stitches into 1. Okay, so we're in round 3. So we've started off by placing 1 single crochet in the first stitch. Now we go into the next stitch, and that's where you place our next increase. Okay, so again, sometimes they're a little bit tight, so you got to help them through. And because we didn't slip stitch, we just keep going around and around. So this is 1, and this is 2. Okay, so we've done 2. Now in the next one, we're only going to do 1. Okay, and then in the following one, we do 2. So that's what we're going to do all the way around. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So I'm going to place 1 more in there. Okay, so do that all the way around. And so now for round 3, we should end up with 18 stitches all the way around. Okay, so go ahead and do that pattern, and I'll meet up with you when you've gotten to your stitch marker. Okay, and this is my last increase here, and I've come up to my stitch marker. Okay, so I've done 18 stitches around. And so basically what you're doing, because we started off with a count of 6, each round gets increased by 6 stitches, and you always want to evenly distribute those increases. So that's why the spacing will increase as you move along. So I'm going to take you through the next round once more before we set you loose. So I'm just going to take out the stitch marker, and in this first stitch, I'm going to place 1 single crochet. Okay, I'm just going to replace that right away so I can always remember where my first stitch was. And now I'm going to place 1 single crochet in the next stitch. So see, 2 individual stitches. Okay, just get that out of the way there. And now I'm going to place my increase in the next stitch. So for round 4, we are increasing into every 3rd stitch. So I'm going back in there. Okay, so the pattern will be 1, 1, 2. So if we can see that there, okay? So again, I'm going to do 1 into the first one here, 1 into the next one, and then 2 into the following. Okay, so hopefully that will give you the idea of how we're working our way up. So you can see my circle is staying nice and flat. Okay, so I am going to set you loose here, and you're just going to keep continuing in this fashion with as many rounds as you need. So here we did 2 individuals and an increase. In the next round, it would be 3 individual stitches and then the increase. The next one would be 4 stitches and then an increase, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so I've already kind of started working on, and this one is, I've done 8 rounds so far. So actually this is perfect that I went into the pink, because you can see there's where my increase is, because there's 2 stitches here. And between the last increase, which is right here, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's increasing into every 7th stitch. And as I continue on, then I'm going to increase into every 8th stitch, then 9th stitch. So far, my diameter, wow, look at that. It's exactly 3 inches. And we know for me, I'm going to need 6.75. So I need to keep doing my circle until I get right about there. So pretty much double the size of what I have now. Okay, so guys, I'm going to let you create the top part of your hat. So you're going to go until you get the measurement across, and then I'm going to pick back up with you, and we're going to talk about then creating the height of your hat. Okay, guys, see you soon. All right, guys, so here is my final circle for the top of my hat. And just to make sure, okay, and I'm just at 6.75 inches. So I'm very happy with that. And of course, as I suspected, I did run out of, I used up all of the hemp cord I had in that package. And the other one, like I said before, was only at 10 pounds. So I actually just went on Amazon and I found this guy, and it came in lavender, and I'm super excited. What was really great is it actually blended nicely into the colors I already have going on. So I'll leave kind of my top as like this cute multicolored pattern. And then the rest is just going to be nice and solid. And I have some of the other colors that I can use for accents at the bottom. So now that I have the width or the diameter for the top of my hat, what we want to do now is we want to create the height of the hat. So remember that figure we took before, which was, we took our hat circumference, we divided it by 10 and multiplied by 4. And so that gave me 8.4 inches, okay? And for you in centimeters, that would be about 21.5 centimeters. So we are no longer going to do any more increasing. Okay, so you can see I've got my little stitch marker there, so I know where the ends of my rounds go. So I did, I think about 14 rounds in total. Might have been 15. So I ended up doing, in my last round, my increase happened in every 16th stitch. So yours might come a little sooner. You might have more rows that you'll need, again, depending on the circumference of your head, okay? So super easy now. There's no more increasing, so we don't have to worry about a thing. And if you want to, you don't even really need a stitch marker anymore, because now we're just going to continuously work in the round until once you stop, like it already has a bit of a bowl shape happening there, but once you stop increasing, your flat circle is going to start to bowl up. and that's what's going to create the portion that's going to sit on your head. Okay, so I myself do like to keep the stitch marker just so I can keep track of how many rounds I'm doing, but you actually don't really need to. You can get rid of it if you want. And now you're just going to simply continue doing a single crochet all the way around. So you can see I just did my last increase was right there. So I've got 2 stitches in there. And so now I'm just going to continue placing 1 single crochet into every single stitch and no increases anymore. So I can sit in front of my favorite TV show and just stitch up a storm until I have the height that I desire. Okay, easy peasy. So I'm going to set you guys loose. I'm going to work on my hat, and I will meet you back here to talk about doing the brim. Okay, so I am almost there. So this is what my hat is starting to look like. So it's definitely taken on that bowl shape. Okay, and I have done so far 18 rounds, and I'm not quite there, but I just want to add a little bit of detailing to my hat. So I'm going to add a little bit of a lacy round to this, just to also allow the hat to have some breathability as well. So just thought I'd show you what I'm going to do. You don't have to do this, but I just thought you might enjoy adding this as a possible little extra feature. So okay, so we're just picking off where I left off on my 18th round. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a little bit of a mesh stitch. So because we're doing single crochets, I'd like my spacing to be a little bit taller. So I'm going to chain 2. So I'm going to chain 1, 2. So I've chained an additional 2 because the first chain will just extend the height of my single crochet a little taller. And the next chain will count as a chain 1 spacer, okay? So what I'll do now is I'm going to skip the next stitch, and into the following stitch, I'm going to place a half double crochet stitch. So I've yarned over first, inserted my hook, okay, yarn over, and now I'm going to pull through all 3 of these loops on my hook here. Okay, so you've got something that looks like this, okay? Then we're going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, and into the following stitch, you'll place a half double crochet. And so this is what I'm going to do all the way around, making sure that I go through all 3 stitches. See? So it's just going to create that nice little lacy look, and pretty straightforward, but just creates a little point of interest, a little extra detail, okay? So if you'd like to do this, then you would follow exactly what I'm doing, and you're just going to go all the way around until we come back to the stitch marker again. Otherwise, you're just going to keep going around doing single crochets until you reach your desired hat depth. Okay, so for those of you that are adding the detailing like I am, I'm just coming up to my stitch marker here. So I've just done a chain 1. I'm going to skip this one, and my final stitch will be just beside that stitch marker. And so some of you may think, uh-oh, that seems odd, but do not fret. So I've just finished my last half double crochet, and now, because remember we're working in the spiral round, yeah? So you're going to have what looks like this little jump here. So all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go right into this guy here, and I'm just going to make a single crochet because that's where I had the stitch marker. I'm just going to replace it. So for me, it's just business as usual. I just like to kind of know where I am here. And now anytime I come up to a space, I'm just going to work into the space. Now you can certainly work into the stitch itself, but I just find for me it's going to be a lot easier if I just work into the space, single crochet, and then I'll work into the actual stitch of the half double crochet. So remember, the loops of your posts will always sit to the right of your stitch on the right side. And if you had watched that little lesson or tutorial on how to identify parts of your stitch, you will remember this information. And if you haven't seen that video, I think it's a very useful video to understand how to place your stitches and what's happening with your stitches. So there will be a link for it in the description box down below. So I would recommend you have a peek at that. And later on, when you start working on things like cabling or back loops and front loops to create extra texture in your work, for those of you that are a little bit newer, it'll make a lot more sense. So there we are. So, okay, so anytime I come up to the space, I'm just working into the space, and then the stitch, I'm working in the stitch. So space, stitch, and then I'm just gonna continue on as if nothing has changed, okay? So I'm probably gonna do just a couple more rows for my hat because I'm getting close to getting the hat depth that I'm happy with. And at this point, you know, because I'm measuring from here all the way down, I'm just over about 7 inches, but I am trying this on as I go, right? And it all depends on where you want it to sit. If you want it to sit more in the middle of your forehead, or if you like it closer to your eyebrows. So this is the perfect time where you should be trying it on as you go. And then we are going to start working on the brim of our sun hat. Okay, so I've come back around and I finished my final round here, and it all looks exactly how I like it, okay? And so now we're going to talk about creating the actual brim. So this is the part of the hat that will start to flare out to create your rim there, okay? So I've still left my stitch marker in there. I just kind of like keeping it there. I don't super need it, but it just helps me gauge as to where I am. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of extra detail here by creating our rim here. So we're actually, where this stitch marker is, we're actually going to skip that stitch and we're going to go into the following stitch. And what we're going to do is we are going to use the half double crochet stitch. And we are going to place 3 half double crochets into the same stitch. So you're going to yarn over, insert, okay, just like that. We're going to do that again. Insert back into the same stitch. And it'll probably stick a little bit because it's a little bit stiffer than regular yarn, but just have a little bit of patience. There's 2, and now we're going to do a third one. One more. And then we'll yarn over and pull through all 3. Sometimes you just gotta snuggle it one at a time. So you have something that looks like that. Okay, so that's a shell made up of half double crochet stitches. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna skip 1 stitch and we're gonna do the same thing into the very next one. And this is the pattern that we're gonna do for this row. And so you'll notice that, we're adding extra stitches here. And you would be correct. So we want to increase our stitch count so that it creates a reason for these stitches to flare out. Okay, so I'll do one more here. So essentially in every other stitch we've increased our stitch counts. Okay, so you'll have something that looks like that. And eventually when you start getting around, you'll notice that this is going to start to kind of bend over, and that's exactly what we want. So you'll place 1 half double crochet shell, which consists of 3 half double crochets. You'll skip 1 stitch and shell, skip 1 stitch and shell, skip shell until you get all the way back to your stitch marker. So I'll meet you back there once you've finished this pattern. Okay, so I'm just doing my last shell here. Okay, and that's my stitch marker just to let me know that I've come to the end of my round. And so in total now, I've got 55 shells. And hopefully you can see that it's now starting to flare out. So you can see my hat is sitting nicely. And so the brim is starting to flare out, which is perfect. So I've got 55 shells in total, which gives me now a total of 165 stitches for the first round, the official round of my brim, okay? So what I'm gonna do now, so I'm just gonna move this up, and this is just so I can kind of keep track of where my rows begin and end, just to keep things moving. So now for round 2 of the brim, we're just gonna keep it simple by placing 1 half double crochet into each stitch all the way around, okay? So we're gonna continue working in the spiral round for now. So we're gonna go in the very next stitch. Now this was the chain 2 and stitch right here where we began the previous row. So I'm not gonna worry too much about this little knot here. I'm gonna work right into the first official stitch, okay? So I'm just gonna yarn over, insert, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3, okay? So nice and easy, round 2 of the brim, just 1 half double crochet into each and every single stitch. Super easy, okay? So just keep doing that all the way around until you come back to your stitch marker. So at the end of this round, you should definitely start seeing that your hat is taking shape. So you can see the edging is happening there. And so now we're going to go on to another round of increases. So I'm just going to take that out there. And whoops, I had one more stitch before the stitch marker. Now I'm going to take that out. So we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and into the 3rd stitch we are going to place 4 half double crochets. So previously when we had done this, we skipped 1 stitch and placed 3 half double crochets. So there's going to be a little bit of a space there, but don't worry. What we do want to do though before we continue doing the other ones, so I want to replace that stitch marker. And it's not the end of the world, but I just kind of like to know where we start and end. I mean, you won't even need the stitch marker because you'll see there's a jog there, but it's just for my own mind. I like to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go back in and do 3 more half double crochets. So again, it's going to be another shell-like stitch. Okay, so there's 3. And I'm going to do 1 more back into the same stitch. You have something that looks like that. And then you're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and into the 3rd stitch you're going to place 4 half double crochets again. Okay, and that is going to be the pattern for this row. You will place 4 half double crochets into 1 stitch, then you'll skip the next 2 stitches, and into the 3rd stitch you'll place 4 half double crochets again. Okay, so do that all the way around, and I'll meet you back up at the stitch marker. Okay, so at the end of round 3 of your brim, your work is going to start to look something like this. So it's starting to sit now, it's starting to flare out, and it is kind of buckling and having a bit of these ripples in there, and that is the effect that I am going for. I'm really excited about working with this hemp cord because I can see and I can feel how it sits a little stiffer than like a cotton yarn, for example, and it holds its shape quite nicely. So yay, very exciting. So We've just come up to the end. We've been doing 4 half double crochets into every 3rd stitch, and I'm just at my stitch marker here, and this pin was just designed to hold the yarn there. And it just so happens that I have 2 stitches left. So I'll take that stitch marker out. Now what I want to do is I actually want to slip stitch to join my round, because now I want to start evening this out a little bit. So these are the 2 stitches here. I'm going to slip stitch right into the top of that first shell there. Okay, so now you can see, so it looks like your work has these little cute little scallops here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do for round 4 of our brim. Okay, we are going to chain 1 and go back into the same stitch and single crochet. Okay. Now we are going to maintain the same stitch count here, but we're going to continue with this shell-like pattern. So here's what we are going to do. We are going to go into the next space here. So see that space there? And we're going to insert 3 half double crochets into this space here. So we have 1, and then we're going to place 2, and then we're going to place 3. Okay, so you've got that shell space there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to skip these next 2 here, and into the 3rd one, what we're going to do is we're going to place 1 single crochet. Okay, just like that. So now we've got a place for our shell stitch to anchor there. Okay, and it's going to create a little gap there, a little lacy gap. That's okay. And then we are going to find the next gap, and we're going to place 3 half double crochets into that space. So this is the pattern for this round. You're going to place 3 half double crochets into the space, into one space. So here's the second half double crochet. Okay, and then here's the third. And then into the next space, we're going to place 1 single crochet. So what does that do? In the previous round, we had done 4 half double crochets, skipped 2, 4 half double crochets. So we always had sets of 4. Now by us doing sets of 3 and then 1, that still maintains our stitch count in multiples of 4 in this case. And so that will help us maintain the stitch count the same for this round. Okay, so I'm going to, and it feels like it's starting to bunch a little bit, but don't worry about that. That will kind of iron itself out in subsequent rounds. And you can see it's starting to create a little gap there. Okay, so we are now going to start working with double crochet stitches. So we've done our single crochet here and we've got our stitch marker. Now we're going to go into the very next space and place 3 double crochets. So you'll pull through the first 2, and then yarn over and pull through the next 2. Okay, so I'm going to do that 2 more times. And what this does is it helps our stitches sit a little bit more relaxed against each other and helps the brim spread out a bit. Okay, so there's 3, that's a shell. Now in the next space, we're going to place a single crochet. And what that does, it helps anchor either side of that curve. Okay, so again, into the next space, we're going to place 3 double crochets. And this is going to be the repeat for this round. Place through 2. I'm going to do that again. Second one. And third. Okay, so you've got a shell in there. And then we're going to place a single crochet into the next space. So what that does is it maintains our stitch count in sets of 4 in this case. So remember, we were doing 4 half doubles, 4 half doubles. So we want to maintain that same number of stitch counts. So if we've got 3 double crochets and a single crochet, that's maintaining the same number of stitches for this round, okay? And then that's all I'm going to do. We're going to repeat that all the way around. So it's really easy in the sense that you just have to look for the spaces, and you'll see that ripple a little wee bit, and that is totally a-okay. So you can see that funky little design being created there, okay? And that's what you're going to do all the way to the end. And I will meet you back at the stitch marker. Okay guys, so I have come up to the end of my round here. And I've got, so this is my stitch marker where I started. I've got one last stitch there. So I've just done a single crochet, which is perfect because now I'm going to insert my last shell stitch here with 3 double crochets. Finishing off round 4 here with 3 double crochets. There's my stitch marker. Just going to take that out. And actually, this is going to help us blend really nicely into the very next row. So we're actually going to not worry about slip stitching because of where we're going. So see how we've come to the beginning of our round where we have 3 double crochets. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the middle double crochet, and into that center one, we're going to place 1 single crochet. And I'm just going to replace my, stitch marker here. We are going to increase our stitches again in this round. So we're going to continue placing shells, but we're going to have a shell consisting of 4 double crochets this time. So now we've got the center of the shell and we've got the dip here where we placed a single crochet in the previous round. So there's a shell and there's the single. There's the shell and there's the single. Okay, so every time we come up to the single crochet, into that stitch we're going to place 4 double crochets. So whereas previously we did 3, we're going to place 4. So there is 1. And back into that same stitch, we're going to place 2. 3. And 4. Okay, so now we've got 4 double crochets, and so now we're going to go where the next shell is, right there, and in the center stitch, which is this one here, the middle of that shell, we're going to place 1 single crochet. So now our repeat has 5 stitches each time. 4 double crochets and a single. 4 double crochets and a single. So now we've just done the single crochet in the center of our shell, in the middle double crochet. So now we're coming up to a dip or the single crochet, and we're going to go back to placing a shell consisting of 4 double crochets. And this is our pattern for round 5 of our brim. Okay guys, so I have just completed round 5 of the brim, and you can see it's looking like that. So now you can see it's definitely starting to flatten out, which is what we want. It's just creating this really pretty little texture with a little bit of a scalloped edge there. So I'm just about at the end here. So I've just done a single crochet, and there's my marker there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that out. And I'm just going to finish off by placing one more shell right in that space there of 4 double crochets. 3 and 4. Okay. So now we're going to move on to round 6, which we're still going to keep increasing because, again, we want our brim to sit a little bit flat. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to skip 2 stitches. So you can see I'm back into my shell here. So this is the very first shell of 4 double crochets we did. So I'm just going to skip those first 2 stitches, and into that third one, I'm going to single crochet just to kind of anchor that last shell to the first. And this is where I'm going to replace my marker just to remind myself where I'm ending and starting. Okay, just like that. Okay, so round 6. We're going to follow the same pattern. We're going to be doing shells and single crochets, shells and single crochets. So what we're going to do is we are going to find the first single crochet, the dip as we called it, right? Which is right there. And this time I am going to place 5 double crochets into the same stitch. So previously we'd done 4. This round we're going to do 5. So again, we're increasing our stitch count here. So there's 1. And I'm going right into the single crochet. So there's 2. Back into that same stitch. There's 4, and here is 5. Okay, so now you have a shell that's sitting a little bit wider. So now we have got 5 double crochets in our shell. Some people will start calling this a fan, shell or fan, very similar terminology. And now what we're going to do is we need to anchor that down with a single crochet. So remember, in the previous round, we had done 4 double crochets. So all we're going to do is we're just going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into the third one, we're just going to place our single crochet there. Just like that. Okay, so that's anchoring down our shell. And then we simply move on to the next dip down. So there we go. We can see our single crochet there. Okay, so there's the single crochet, and we're just going to do the same thing. You're going to place a shell, which will consist of 5 double crochets into the same stitch. And that's it. So round 6, it's going to be a repetition. So the pattern is now very similar. It's always a shell, single crochet, shell, single crochet. And you're going to... And for round 6, the shells will consist of 5 double crochets. So you're always doing a shell into the single crochet of the previous row, and then you're going to do a single crochet into the third stitch of that shell. Okay, so shell, single crochet, shell, single crochet. Off you go, round 6, and I'll meet you at the start of round 7. Okay, so once you come to the end of round 6 of your brim, your work is going to start looking something like this. Isn't that pretty? So if you set your hat down, you can now see that your brim is taking shape. And don't worry if this looks a bit flat right now. It will have a bit of shape there as well. Okay, so now some of you may think, oh, I kind of like this length as it is. And if you do, you're more than welcome to stop now. Like if you just want a little something to shade your eyes. But I already did something similar to that in a sun hat tutorial I did last year. And I'll put a link for that in the description box down below. So because this year I want to do a nice big wide brim, we're going to keep going. So round 6 is ending just before where I've got the stitch marker there. See that? So that's where I had the single crochet. And so I've just single crocheted to the top of the shell of the previous round. Okay. And so just to continue on, make it nice and seamless. We are now going to do a shell of 6 stitches. So essentially we still want to kind of widen our circle. We want to widen the circle of our brim. So we still need to keep increasing stitches. So I'm just going to take this out real quick. Okay. So now into the dip here, or where we have a single crochet, we're now going to place a shell stitch of 6 double crochets. So in the previous round we were doing 5 double crochets. And we've got our 6th one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now what we're going to do is we are going to find the 3rd stitch of the shell of the previous round. So remember in the previous round we did shells of 5 double crochets. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So you're going to count the stitch 1, 2, and 3. This will land you in the middle of the shell, and we're going to place our single crochet there. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just replace my stitch marker. So remember, we had the stitch marker where the single crochet was. So I'm actually now going to place it in the center, or in between, because remember we added a stitch, so we're in between the stitches there. So that's kind of the end, or the beginning, the middle of the beginning of round 7, which is our current round. And that is going to be the repeat for round 7. So you've got a single crochet in the 3rd stitch of the shell from the previous round. Into the dip, we're going to do 6 double crochets, single crochet in the center. 6 double crochets in the dip, single crochet in the center. So it's pretty much the same idea that we've been doing in previous rounds. So that's what you're going to do for round 7. Okay, so at the end of round 7, your brim is starting to look like this. So you can see it's starting to sit a little flatter now, and such a pretty design. So let's take you on to round 8. So we're going to still increase again, but we're going to do something a little bit different for round 8. So we've just finished our shell, and this is the center of the shell of our previous round. So we're going to make sure to single crochet into that to anchor our last shell. Okay, I'm just going to move my stitch marker up. This is just basically so I can make sure that I stay on track, knowing where I start and end. Okay, so in the previous round, our shells were consisting of 6 double crochets. We now want to increase this number to 7 stitches. But as we increase the number of stitches into the same area here, you can see it's going to start kind of expanding that. And we do want this to give us a bit of shade. So we are going to go for round 8. What we're going to do is we're just going to simply place 1 single crochet into each stitch until we get to this dip. So for now, we're going to place, whoops, one here and one here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to place a single crochet inside the single crochet, but we're going to chain one and go back into that single crochet. So this is where we're going to increase our stitch count, is in the single crochets, okay? And then you continue on, one single crochet into each stitch until you come to the next single crochet, which is coming up here. So single crochet is there, so we're going to place a single crochet, chain one, and another single crochet. Just like that. So now you're going to get these little mini peaks forming there, okay? That's it, that's all. Pretty easy, just single crochets all the way around in this fashion. And that's it for round 8, and I will meet you at the end of this round. Okay guys, so I've just come to the end of that little round of single crochets. So you've got a little something that looks like that. So where we have the dips, we now have this chain one space here. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next round, which is round 9. And I'm just going to take that stitch marker out just to kind of mark that spot. Okay, and I'm going to single crochet into that and replace my stitch marker, just so I remember where everything starts and stops. So here's what we're going to do in the next round. So we need to keep increasing, okay? So I've experimented already with how it's going to look. I am going to go right away into the dip. Now remember, with the dips, we had created a single crochet, chain one, single crochet. So that's going to give us a little bit more space to create a larger fan, right? So we were working with the shells, and now we're adding more and more double crochet stitches, which is really creating a fan effect. So now we're going to place into this chain one space, we're going to place 7 double crochets. So we're really increasing the number of stitches here. So you'll yarn over, insert into that space. So the first one always feels really stretched out because we're going quite far. But as we continue to place more double crochets, it flattens out quite nicely. Okay, so there's 3. Okay, there's 6. And now we need one more back into that same space. So you'll probably see why we needed to do that chain one, just to give us a little bit more breathing room so we can place all those stitches in there. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now what we're going to do is we are going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into the 3rd stitch here, we're going to place our single crochet. Okay, just like that. And so this will anchor each side of our shell. So now you can really see that that scalloped edging is really coming through quite nicely. Okay, and that's what you're going to do all the way around. So every time you come up to your dip, which technically there's a little peak now in the dip, you will place 7 double crochets. You will then skip the next 2 stitches. Now be careful here, because the next stitch is actually nestled right there. So you'd skip 1, 2, and into the 3rd, which is somewhat on top of the previous shell, you're going to place a single crochet. Then into the next peak, which you might have to pull out there, 7 double crochets, skip 2, single crochet. 7 double crochets, skip 2 stitches, single crochet. Okay? And that is what you're going to do all the way around until you come back to your stitch marker. Okay Okay guys, so I have finished the end of round 9 and I'm really happy with how it's coming out. I just love this little scalloped edge and I got so excited I just continued on to round 10, I should say. So basically the pattern keeps increasing in the same fashion. So I'm not going to go through every single round in further detail. I think you kind of get the gist of it. For these, I'm going to do 2 more rounds of the shells here. And I'm just going to keep them rows of just shells and single crochets, shells and single crochets. So in round 8, we did that round of single crochet. We did that round of single crochets and then single crochet chain 2 to create a peak. I did that to kind of keep the shaping going, but I'm pretty happy with the way it is now. Now, if you want to make your brim a little wider, then you're going to want to keep increasing the number of stitches with every increment. So in this round, which is round 10, my shell now consists of 8 double crochets. So in the next one, you would do 9, and then the next one, you would do 10. Now it is getting a bit kind of wide for a shell that large, and that's why I'm going to do 2 more rounds of these shells. So I will get to 10 double crochets in my shells. Once I get that width, then I will do a few rounds, finishing rounds of single crochets to give it just a little bit more width. But that is pretty much it. So I'm going to set you guys loose. I'm going to do 2 more rounds and I'll meet back up with you at the end of round, I think it's 11 or 12, but I'll meet you guys back here shortly. Okay, so I have decided to finish my brim after doing the 8 double crochet shell. And I think that's plenty. I'm also starting to run out of my, my cord here. So I'm very happy with that. What I am going to do is just do a nice little finishing row of single crochet stitches. So it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way around until we come back to the beginning. So you can see where I've kind of slip stitched the end of the previous round. So I'm just going to chain 1 and then into the next stitch. I'm just going to do a single. So there will not be any more increases here. We're just going to keep it nice and straight. 1 single crochet into each stitch. Okay, and it's just going to be pretty straightforward. So don't worry about, where there's a dip. Okay, so you're here into the single crochet. You just insert as usual and continue on. Okay, so I'm just doing a few here so you can see a little bit of the effect here. Okay, so you're just kind of lengthening that last shell that you're doing. It's just really meant to be nice little finishing touch. So 1 single crochet all the way around until you come back to the beginning, and I should just replace that there so I can remember where to come back to. And then we'll be ready to fasten off and do a final touch. All right, so here we have our final product done. Now, my head is a little bit bigger than this, I don't know, what do you call this? A mannequin head, a display head? I'm not sure. But anyway, I just wanted to give you guys the perspective of what it looks like. I'm super happy with how it came out. And the fact that I used this cording just gives it that little bit of extra kind of stiffness to it. So here it is. It is complete with the single crochet edging there. And it just gave it this really beautiful finishing touch. And I really love how this created such a beautiful texture. And I do like that it's a little bit floppy. You can play with it. You can manipulate it. You can kind of flip it up if you want. And I'm super happy with it. And so it's got a very playful top here. And we are done our beach hat. Now I am going to add one little embellishment here. Remember how we did this little detail here? Now what you can do is you can do many things with this. You can just simply leave it as is, as a nice little detail, or you can, if you found that your hat became too wide, you can actually interweave here a little elastic, and then it'll give your hat some give, which actually will help it to sit a little bit more snugly. Now this hat fits me just fine, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a really pretty little kind of flowery embellishment in this spot here. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of add this little strip here, and I hope you can see what I see, that already it just kind of elevates it just in this really refined way. Now, if you're curious how I made this, those of you that followed the crochet series of 2020, this was the bridal boho crown, and it was just basically a really pretty, simple little headband that we made for a bridal occasion. But you know what? You can use this for just about anything. So if you're curious on how I made that, I'm going to leave a link for it in the description box down below. I'm also going to leave it up in the cards to make it really quick for you guys to access it. So you can pause this video, click that one, make your little strip here, or your little band, and come back, and I'm just going to show you how I'm quickly just going to sew it onto the hat. Oh, and if you do follow it exactly how I made this in that tutorial, the length that I created for that is exactly the perfect length for my hat. So if you followed my hat along perfectly, this will be exactly the perfect length to come right around to your hat here. In fact, it'll probably sit a little bit loose, and that is great. Okay, just like that. So now we're going to sew it in. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure that it's not twisted and that it's sitting with the right side facing out on the outside of your hat, okay? And it actually will sit probably really relaxed, and that is perfect. Because remember, when you put this on your head, it is going to stretch, so you don't want to snug this in too tightly. So I've got my two ends here, and what I'm going to do, using these two ends, I'm just going to feed it, and I'll actually just use my darning needle here. So see how they have these little eyelets here? So I am just going to feed it through here. Whoops. Okay, so that one of the ends is sitting there. And then again, just make sure it's not twisted. Just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one here. But I'm going to do it from the opposite side. So this one came from right to left. So this one I'm going to go from left to right. And I know this seems like everything is a bit wonky, but it'll all make sense very soon. Okay, so now you've got these two ends here like that, and you just pull them a little bit more snugly. And I'm going to tie a knot here to secure them. And that is why you want to leave, I mean, these tails aren't super long, but you want to leave a little bit of a tail on each end that you can work with. And now using this longer one, I'm just going to bring these two little edges together so you can't even tell where they join. Now, if you really wanted to embellish it, you can add a flower applique on this side. And we've got a few flower appliques in our crochet playlist, which I'll also leave a link for in the description box down below. I'm going to just use this tail to just bring these two ends together. And I'm not going to be too fancy about it. I'm just going to just gently weave it back and forth, picking up a few loops here and there. And that's it. See, so it just snuggles it in nice and cozy. And Then I'm just going to tie it off. Whoops. So you see, it's nothing super complicated. It's just, most of it is just stuff that you just need a little bit of patience for. Okay. And then I'm just going to pull this. I'm just going to hide these ends. I'm going to just bring them to the inside of my hat. Oops, just like that. And then I'll knot them on the inside and snip off my yarn. So at least they're nice and hidden. Okay, just like that. And they're gone. So they're on the inside of my hat now. Okay, so I know that my band is now secured to my hat. Now, I don't want to actually, for me, I'm not going to sew every single eyelet around just because, again, I want it to kind of stretch within itself. But I will pick a few spots to secure it. So we know that here I've secured it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay it like this where it bends. Just a nice crease. And then maybe over here. So I basically am going to try and hit like 4 corners, the 4 points, right? So I have the back, the front, and maybe one on each side. And again, you don't want it to be too tight. You just want it to sit over the eyelet and just create a nice little embellishment. And that's it. So I will do another one here and another one there in the 4 spots. And there we have it, your beautiful summer sun hat. I hope you guys have had some fun working on this project, a little bit outside of the box, but so fun. And if you've got the patience, you are going to get so many fun compliments on this hat. As always, if you have any questions, just leave me a comment in the comment box down below, or you can always email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at The Stitch Sessions. And remember, if you are not yet subscribed and part of the Stitch Sessions family of Crochet Friends, what are you waiting for? Come click that red subscribe button, click the notification bell, and you'll be able to stay up to date every time we upload a new tutorial every Wednesday morning. And we get to have some crochet fun and dive into some new crochet adventures. In the meantime, have an amazing day. Enjoy the sunshine. Happy crocheting. Take good care, and I'll see you guys in the next session. Bye-bye.